trying to Gramps. Yes. Go ahead.
Rabbi is going to be speaking this morning about Maskilim versus traditional Jews.
Thank you, Andy. And thank you to KOH as well. Let me know, we want to introduce, we've got here Evan, who needs no introduction, from Los Angeles, and Will, who is shadowing him. We're so glad to have you here. I just want to know from Evan if I'm standing in a good spot. I don't like being behind a podium. Good.
Use the podium as a center. Like if you're in the stand in front of the podium.
Okay, perfect.
And then use your lav mic, not the.
Yeah. I'm going to give this back to you. Okay, everyone on Zoom can hear me?
Yes.
So I want to thank Talia and Joanne and KOH for making this possible. I want to start by responding to Dwight's question last time. I went to the professor who first taught me about the Hasidim versus the Mitnagdim, who is now fairly local, Joshua Shanes in Davis, and he said he didn't have anything on. I heard it from him, but he said he had nothing on the Hasidim putting the Mitnagdim in Cherem, so I misunderstood. That did not happen. So I've got an answer, and I gave an answer last time to Nathan about his question. We're actually going to go into your territory, Nathan, a little today. So all three of these classes, this is the third and final one, lead into one another. We started with Shabtai Tzvi versus Jacob Sasportis, and then the Mitnagdim, the opponents of the Hasidim, viewing the Hasidim as Sabbatean, having strange practices, believing all is God, and potentially in pantheism. And now we go to their common enemy, the Maskilim. After this class, I'll just mention now, there's one of two directions one can go, and there are others, opportunities to learn in those directions. So one of the directions one can go is the Haskalah, or the Jewish Enlightenment, led to the development of Reform, Conservative, and Modern Orthodox Judaism. It just so happens we're at that point in our Introduction to Judaism class. We had the class on Orthodoxy and Modern Orthodoxy already, but we have, this week I'm teaching Thursday at 7, Conservative Judaism, and next week a Reform rabbi is teaching Reform Judaism and how it formed. So if you're interested, let me know. Even if you're not signed up for that class, you can go to those classes and learn more. And the other direction one could go is this was really the proto-Zionism. And I decided, originally I was thinking of doing the third class, the different streams of Zionism, but given that Jonathan Lightman is teaching 21-week, or I think it's even more, course on it, I didn't want to interfere with anything he was doing in case anyone in his class was here. So I decided to focus on the Haskalah, one of my greatest influences on becoming a rabbi. First, let me do a shout out for KOH, and then I will really begin. I took 3 books that I had gotten from KOH, and this is the third one I'll be returning, on the genius, Elijah of Vilna and the Making of Modern Judaism. And it was so helpful to me because even though it was last time's topic, it talks about him and his reactions against the Maskilim. By the way, what do these words Haskalah and Maskilim mean? So, it comes from seichel, which is intellectual, the intellectual part of the brain. And a lot of the thought dealt with philosophy and integration into the Western world and the top intellectual topics that were studied in Western European universities. And of course, the start was Germany. Germany didn't officially become a country until 1871, but there were many different Germanic influences, what? Principalities, and it was one of the freest places in terms of learning. And I'll take you back, not the topic of this class, but a couple hundred years before, Martin Luther and the theses and Protestantism. So Germany was always a place where there was great change that had happened. And what was the change that had happened here? The freedom of the universities and the integration into greater society. So while I was mistaken by saying Hasidim put minagdim in cherem, I was not mistaken in saying the power of cherem, or excommunication, really goes away in the 1700s. Why does it go away? Because it's only powerful if you're in a closed community where people there, as happened 100 years before with Baruch or Benedict Spinoza, say, we can't do business with you, you can't frequent our stores, we can't even acknowledge you, you're dead to us. If you're in a more open society, it doesn't matter in the same way. And we'll see one of the followers of the guy I'm starting with now, Moses Mendelssohn, was put in cherem. It didn't really impact him so much. So you have to start Haskalah, the Enlightenment, the intellectual, with Mendelssohn. And I'll get to a personal story of how this ironically led me to become a rabbi a little later. I'll save it. Okay. So what's going on with Moses Mendelssohn? So first of all, you have a new phenomenon of last names or family names. Not new to Germany per se, but generally people were referred to by their name and where they were from. So who is Moses' father? Mendel of Dessau. So that's where he's from, Dessau in Germany. And he, along with a number of his siblings, took the name Mendelssohn, son of Mendel, his father. So they took that name as opposed to just saying their first name and the area in which they were from. The Hasidic people who we learn from, who were around a similar time period, even a little later than Moses Mendelssohn, were all known by their town. Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the town he ended up in. Levi Yitzhak of Berdichev, Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk. Not so here. Mendel of Dessau is the last one of the family, really known by that name of his town where he's from. Then you have Mendelssohn. Mendelssohn was destined to be a rabbinic scholar and a prodigy. He took things in very quickly. And who was the rabbi he learned with in town? And I'll recommend a podcast I actually learned about from Jonathan Lightman. I think it's called History for the Curious. It's by Rabbi Aubrey Hirsch. And it is a phenomenal podcast. And it just so happened this week, and so when I was on vacation, I listened to his take on Mendelssohn and some of the information I took here. He is a British Orthodox rabbi. So, what happens is, he's schooled by a rabbi named David Frankel. David Frankel I knew of because of his commentary on the Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, the one that gets second shrift because it wasn't as authoritative, it's shorter. Shorter meaning it's harder to understand. They presume you know a lot more, so they make it very terse. And David Frankel is the main commentary there. It's called Korban Ha'edah, the sacrifice of the community. So David Frankel is a pious rabbi who teaches Mendelssohn and introduces him to the philosophy of the Rambam, of Moses Maimonides. And Moses Maimonides, I think, unfairly takes the blame for being the leader of all this trouble and secularism. Why do I think unfairly? Because on one hand, it's fair that he took and tried in the Guide of the Perplexed to tie in Jewish philosophy with Aristotle. So he did use the Goyisha, the Greek sources. And on the other hand, he remained someone who was, even while in his lifetime he had opposition and his books were burned and he had the Ravad he had to deal with, he, on the whole, really remained committed to traditional Jewish practices. And so at JTS we'd say Maimonides was the first conservative rabbi. No, he was definitely not. But Mendelssohn studies him, and he's very influenced by it. And what he winds up doing is he winds up, like Maimonides wrote in the vernacular of the time, for a broader audience in Judeo-Arabic, for his Guide to the Perplexed, Moreh Nevuchim, Mendelssohn writes in the lingua franca in German. And what does he write? The first book he writes is very interesting. It's a book on the immortality of the soul. And he does not quote any Jewish sources. Maimonides got in trouble for not quoting his sources. But Maimonides' sources are found in the Talmud. Mendelssohn's sources are based on Judaism, but they're not direct quotations or citations, which gets you into trouble, got Maimonides into trouble. Because if you're not, who are you to write on your own without giving tradition to your ancestors who are closer to Sinai than you? So Maimonides does this, and he writes about God's goodness. Mendelssohn does this, thank you. God's goodness, the immortality of the soul. You know, I have this on my phone. I want to look down on my phone, so I printed it. It's like 10 fonts. So the immortality of the soul. And he gets challenged by other Western philosophers of the day. He has some challenges from people like Immanuel Kant, but the greater challenge is by someone not as well known, Lavater. And Lavater says to him, how can you be so intelligent and remain a religious Jew? I thought if you were intelligent, you'd become a Christian. So what did Mendelssohn say? He's Jewish because he believes in Judaism. There's less irrationality than there is in Christianity. That's his answer here. But he has a lot of pressure to defend his views, because this is his first book. It's not written in Hebrew. It's not written with traditional Jewish sources. And his pressure leads, and I learned this from the Aubrey Hirsch podcast, him to suffer a nervous breakdown, because he's trying to reconcile living a traditional observant life with appealing to the greater society and appealing in that way. And what ends up happening, he writes a number of commentaries. He writes some information about Jewish law, but without Choshen Mishpat, the primary category of the code of Jewish law, without focusing on the Jewish court being the place you go to. And I've even mentioned this in previous classes, and this is still true in the ultra-Orthodox world, in the Haredi world. If there's a dispute between two Jews, you go to a Jewish court. Don't go to the Goyish court, no. But that's not Mendelssohn's focus. Mendelssohn is trying to bring Judaism into the broader German society as a religious Jew. Not an easy task. And he has success in this founder of the Enlightenment, but he will not have as much success as someone who comes slightly after him. Samson Raphael Hirsch, the founder of modern Orthodoxy, who says Torah im derech eretz, Torah with the ways of the world, and does found a movement and does make show how you can be traditionally pious and take on a career, wear Western garb, make changes to your name, and that's all okay, that you can do that. I'm not going to go into Hirsch because, again, that's the focus of the other introduction to Judaism about how, but the one who there was a controversy with was not the prayer book of Hirsch per se, but it was the Bible of Mendelssohn. Moses Mendelssohn translates the Bible into German. Big no-no. We already had a fast day in our history for the translation of the Bible into Greek, the Septuagint. It used to be that we had 3 fast days in a row. The 8th of Tevet, the translation of the Septuagint Bible, the 9th of Tevet, the death of Ezra, and the 10th of Tevet, which we still have, the siege of the walls of Jerusalem by the Babylonians. Of course, it became difficult to fast 3 days in a row. We just had the 10th of Tevet now. So there you go. Even minor fasts. I mean, I'm guessing like Ramadan, you ate a lot at night, but then you fast the next day. So, but what happens is he translates the Bible, and he makes it open to the masses. Now, he's not the first to translate. Of course, the Christian Bible had been translated well before, but for an Orthodox Jewish leader to authorize the translation of the Bible and to make his own commentary on the Bible called the Biur, where he tries to connect or harmonize Western German philosophy with Torah. That was something that was unheard of. Unfortunately, Mendelssohn does not have a very good legacy. And this is not all on Mendelssohn, but I wanted to just point out he does have one student. I believe he pronounced his name Nachman Westerly, who takes his ideas and even goes a bit further. Naphtali, not Nachman. You see, I wanted to make sure I got it right. Naphtali Hirsch Westerly, who published a work, Divrei Shalom Ve'emet, Words of Peace and Truth, which was a manifesto of the Haskalah. And he distinguishes between the laws of man and the laws of God. And you can see where this is kind of dangerous. I mean, this is a distinction that would be made later by Reform Judaism between the moral commandments and ritual commandments. But in this case, it's saying some of these are connected to humanity and others are connected to God. And he's put in cherem, but it doesn't seem to affect his life to the greatest degree because he's able to integrate within German society at that time. Naphtali Hirsch Westerly. So, unfortunately, what winds up happening, and then I'm going to go to Eastern Europe, and I'll go to my story that I really want to tell. Here's what winds up happening. Besides Westerly, Mendelssohn doesn't leave a great legacy of followers. In fact, looking back, hindsight being 2020, we know of his grandson, Felix Mendelssohn, who was a Christian. And so this idea, well, we have Jewish grandchildren, is often traced to Mendelssohn. Now, why didn't he succeed? So Rabbi Hirsch, Aubrey Hirsch, believes that there was nothing to continue. He was too liberal for the Orthodox community at the time, who wanted to stay within the confines of their shtetl. And when modern Orthodoxy started soon after, he was viewed as too conservative, and he was also viewed that the philosophy, because philosophy is something, I mean, the intellectual, the elites, was not something that would appeal, again, to the average person, and so it didn't really connect. There was a disconnect. So unfortunately, he does not have the best reputation in a lot of the world. I think some of that's a little unfair. Now, Mendelssohn, we're talking about here 1729 to 1786. So we're talking about the mid-1700s in Germany. We have to recognize that these ideas of the openness of society and the integration took time depending on where one lived. For example, in Russia, where I'm going, the territories of Russia, Jews were very much confined. I mean, later on they were confined. I mean, Catherine the Great confined them to the Pale of Settlement. And Russia didn't free its serfs till 1848. So they were still in a medieval time. Austria, right next to Germany, Jews didn't have complete civil rights till 1870. Mendelssohn died in 1786. So depending on the time period, and depending on where one lived, really depended on how much freedom they had. Now, I'll tell the story and then I'm going to have Talia distribute the handouts. My first semester of college at University of Wisconsin, I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to do pre-law. So I did Poli-Sci 101 and was kind of a little bored, although I learned a lot about campaign finance reform, and boy, has it changed since 2002. We're not going to go there. But I took a Hebrew class for the retro credits. I got AP credits, and then I'm like, I want the retro credits because Wisconsin took everything, so I could be a second semester sophomore. And the class was on the Haskalah, on the Jewish Enlightenment, and it was specifically on the Russian-based poets who I learned about from day school, but I gained a greater appreciation into them. And so here we go, not only to the start of integration into secular society, but at one of the dangers of the Haskalah, the Jewish Enlightenment, which is really the loss of public Yiddishkeit, public Judaism. And yet, ironically, these people really impressed me that I studied. This was Judah Leib Gordon. This was Shaul Chernichovsky and Chaim Nachman Bialik. Why did they impress me? They all lived in different times. We're talking mid-1800s all the way into the 1900s for Bialik. They impressed me because they wrote in beautiful Hebrew. This is before Eliezer ben Yehuda modernized Hebrew. It's beautiful, easy to read Hebrew. We're not going to read the Hebrew today, but I did include it with the handouts. They knew their Bible cold. And until recently, in the secular Israeli schools, people knew Bible better than in a lot of the religious schools here. And they have this longing to return to Israel. I mean, in fact, if it wasn't for the Eastern European Jews and the pogroms that would happen later, I mean, Herzl might have taken us to the Uganda plan, which was really Kenya, as I learned from Jonathan Lightman. Or he might have taken us out somewhere in Argentina because he just wanted a safe haven. He was a secular journalist. These people had the connection, secular as they might have been, to the land of Israel. So I want to jump to that, and Talia is going to distribute the handouts. My teacher who taught this was very secular, anti-rabbinic. Actually, those who know Rabbi Rabashaw, his daughter was in class with her. And I told his daughter, who I've never met in person, Alana, that when I told her that Rachel Brenner, that she was an influence in me becoming a rabbi, she chased me out. It was like Shammai. Chased me out with the building cubit. She was so angry. How could this be? Because, as we'll see in one of the poems, the rabbis emasculated the Jewish warrior, the Jew from the desert, with the straps of tefillin. So we'll see that. This first poem is from 1863 by Judah Lieb Gordon. So 100 years after Mendelssohn's influence. Because, again, ideas took a long time to spread. So this, I cannot lecture, I can have some participation when everyone has one of these.
It's really powerful.
Well, Dale, since you've already started reading, why don't you read for us Awake My People by Judah Lieb Gordon.
Is that I come to you?
Oh, no, that one's next. Okay. I didn't include Bialik here. I only included my two favorites, Judah Lieb Gordon, because these two really show the thought of the Maskilim. That's why I included these two. Anyone there at Awake My People? Lee, can you read this for us?
Awake my people, until when will you sleep? The night is ended, the sun is illuminated. Wake up, turn your eyes this way and that. Please recognize your time and your place. Could it be that the time has stood by and its wings have grown limp? You have been forced out of the four corners of the earth. Or perhaps the world has not ceased for 2,000 years, taking away your freedom and causing you to wander. From then now, many generations have been swept away, seas and lands from which they were scattered. Changes and substitutions came and went, but new happenings are here now. Or now here. In this land, Europe, there are revitalization and rebirth. The development of Europe, which hasn't even considered Europe, the tiniest portion of the world, yet which of the loftiest in terms of intellectual pursuit.
Stop there for a second. I'm going to have Ariel pick up. So he's talking about Europe here. You see where we are? Last line.
This is the land of Eden, to her we enter in. Her sons are brothers, to her they call out. For how long will we see their closeness as merely a guess? Why do you walk against them? They have already removed suffering from your shoulders. They have lifted the yoke off your necks. They have obliterated their hearts they have liberated from their hearts hatred, falsehood, and vanity. They have given to you their hands, enabled you to go in peace. Lift up your head, straighten your back, and with eyes of love look out to them. Give in to wisdom and the knowledge of your hearts. Be an enlightened nation, speaking in their language. Everyone who has understanding will learn wisdom from you. Workers and artisans, everyone who works in industry, the strong of heart will work for you as an army. The farmers will buy fields and plows. Bring your successes to the state treasury. When you enter, offer up part of your gifts. Be a man when you go out and a Jew in your tent, a comrade to those in your land and a servant to your king.
Any reactions to this?
I got a reaction. That is a heck of a line. Be a man when you go out and a Jew in your tent. The implication being that these are different things. Mm-hmm. That being a Jew and being a man are irreconcilable. One gets a sense of there's a sort of background anti-Semitism in European thought, where Jewish men are seen as unmasculine and Jewish women are seen as unfeminine. That shows up in old European art and literature and stuff, and this feels almost like, or perhaps not almost, it feels like the poet has to some degree internalized that image and is taking it as true. That being a Jew means not being a man. And I appreciate that he's not advocating the abandonment of Judaism, but it's like he says, leave that in your tent. When you go out, be a man, be a comrade to your land, be, presumably a Frenchman or a German or an Italian or whatever, and a servant to your king. Be loyal to this non-Jewish country you're in. Just very, very striking.
Now, there was one piece that I left out until now that influenced this. And this is why the traditional Jews, whether you were a mitnagid or a Hasid, you were so against this. Because it wasn't so easy to just say, oh, go into the secular world and do this. So, in the early 1800s, 1807, Napoleon started a Parisian Sanhedrin, which had nothing to do with the traditional Sanhedrin. It was a court of the Jewish leaders of the time. And what did he do? So again, that's Western Europe. And this is much later because it's in Eastern Europe. It took time for it to assimilate. He said, are you a Jew or are you a Frenchman? And that idea really spread. That you can choose one or the other, or you need to bifurcate them. You can't have both. And so it threatened the entire traditional way of life. And there were spies as well, and there were court Jews, there were informants on people, because they said, look at this gift that we're giving you. I don't want to compare it to Antiochus and the Greeks. It's not the same. But they're saying, look at this gift. We're going to give you this gift. But we want you to assimilate fully into our culture and identify with us. That's why Judah Lieb Gordon's saying this czar. I mean, and granted, he's writing during the time of Alexander II. That's the best time for Jews in Russia. 1881, Alexander III, not so good. The pogroms really get started, and you have the first Aliyah to Palestine. Dwight has something to add.
I just wanted to. I don't need this.
Should be on.
That's okay. Alright, you don't need my.
I'm just to be contrarian here, I'm going to complain slightly about Nathan's interpretation. It's of course a very accurate interpretation if you take the one sentence out of context. But I think the context is trying to suggest that not that they are completely opposite, but that you can and should be both. By being a man, you mean a member of the community in which you're living in the diaspora. Bring your successes to the state treasury. Be a servant to your king, meaning the king of the land in this case. So, in other words, what he's not saying, oh, you can only be one or the other, or you've got to hide it, but he's saying that you've got to go out of your tent, and you've got to become a part of the community, because the opportunity is now there, and you will benefit, and your countrymen will benefit, a new time is coming where we can be part of a broader community.
So often this is translated, be a man in the street, and Heya Adam b'seitecha. Really, it's in your goings out, in your commerce with others, the Yehudi ba'ohalach, and a Jew in your tent. It's often translated, be a man in the street and a Jew in your home. That's how it's generally viewed.
But it's what he meant by it, not just what
Yeah.
What's the translation? I mean, what's the exact
be
translation?
a
Man, when you go out, and a Jew in your tent. Which a tent, we know, an ohel is like a building in your construction. It's not just like a camping tent. It's where you live. Yeah.
It goes on, be a
I saw
brother
there. Yeah.
be a brother to the people of your country.
Yes.
And
Fraternity. Think
And-
about the French Revolution. Oh, go ahead.
and and a eved, it says here, but in this case it's not really a slave, be a, what are you to your king? You're a, okay, well, yeah, I think we have a more modern word. Okay, fine, be a servant to your king. But more important, ach livnei artzecha.
Yeah.
Be a brother
Yep.
to the people of your country.
Yeah.
And that was his central point.
Liberté, égalité, fraternité. Yeah.
I do want to add something completely
Go ahead,
different
add it.
to what you said. I mean, the role of Napoleon in all of this is, of course, extremely significant, and I want to just relate a small anecdote about the bargain that Napoleon offered. Said, you can, we invite you to be citizens, but you've got to be not so different. So when I was a child, actually, I happened to be in Germany with my parents, and we went to a brunch, I think, at the home of a family after going to services on Shabbos, and they served ham. And I looked at my parents and said, what is it? Aren't they Jewish? Why are they serving ham? And my father explained to me that this was in the township of Westphalia. And it was one of the contracts of the Napoleonic order that that Napoleon or his representative said, look, your Jews are living in Westphalia. The most important product of Westphalia is Westphalian ham. You have to start eating it. And so Westphalian ham was declared, that's what I was told, was declared kosher in that area. I didn't eat any, but...
We'll take a couple more, and then I want to move to something with the traditionalists I think is very important here.
I hope this is working. Anyway, there are two things that I've noticed from this, and the first is that it's basically a lot of this text tells us that Jewish thought and Jewish tradition and everything is inferior because it's not keeping up with whatever Europe is offering. And, it's very demeaning to Jewish thought, I think. And the second thing is, I read in here the Christian concept of render unto Caesar.
Interesting. I want to say something about the first. Reform Judaism in Europe and in America would capitalize on that progressive revelation. Look at what we're exposed to now, as opposed to in the shtetls. Look at what you get to see now. And that, of course, remained a big part of Reform Judaism until Hitler's rise to power. And then we're not getting better. And before I go to Nathan, I want to say something about traditionalist response. As the Enlightenment ideas become stronger, the innovations, and if you read this book, Vilna Gaon had his own innovations. I talked about a couple of them last week. Beginning Shabbat earlier, we still follow that in Jerusalem. But as you go through time, Hasidim and the Mitnagdim become ossified. You have Khatam Sofer is the main reactor against this, Moses Sofer. And what does he say? Chadash asur mina Torah. Innovation is forbidden from the Torah. And so that's why a lot of what I was talking about with Hasidim last week doesn't seem to apply anymore. And Khatam Sofer would have been a Misnagdi, but it doesn't matter who's who anymore. It just matters we have a threat, the loss of Judaism here, completely, because you're in Gentile society, you're going to intermarry, you're going to, your children or your grandchildren won't be Jewish. Therefore, we need to double down and harp on our tradition. Nathan.
I don't want to start like a debate going over here with Dwight, because the truth is I broadly agree with you. I think that you were very accurately describing the intention of the poet in writing this poem. What I'm looking at is not the poet's intention, which is, I think, essentially as you describe it. He's not saying stop being Jews. He's saying Jews, come out, be part of the nation, speak in their language. Don't just be in there speaking Yiddish, learn German or Polish or whatever the language of the people around you is. But reading between the lines, what I see is an assumption that a lot of anti-Jewish stereotypes are true. This poet seems to be assuming that we did not bring our successes to the state treasury. That I'm reading that as that Jewish success and prosperity has enriched you, but not the countries around you. Make sure that your success enriches everyone else, which is a long-standing anti-Jewish canard. He says...
He's talking about money when he talks about riches there. He's talking about bringing your cultural riches to the
I mean, he could be talking. Certainly he mentions cultural, ahead of it. But yeah, what I see here is that offer you talked about, the Enlightenment offer. If you assimilate, if you speak the be an enlightened nation, speak their language, work with them, bring your successes to the state treasury, be a man when you go out, a comrade to your land, be loyal to the nation you're part of. And if you do this, then they'll not discriminate against you, and anti-Semitism will end and will be accepted. And that is a very real offer they made, and we of course know that they never followed through with it. Which is perhaps the lens through which I'm looking at this, which is a big part of this offer is the assumption that the reason why Jews face discrimination and isolation was because we didn't speak the language, was because our successes didn't translate into their successes. But I would argue that was never the case in the first place. And so an offer like that, we could never uphold our side of the bargain because what it was asking us to do was not, was something we had done before. Anyway, my 2 cents, and I'll stop.
Okay, we're going to do one more. And this, if you thought this one was jarring, wait till you hear this. This is the most extreme poem. Joe Chernichovsky, I live near Chernichovsky Street. But this is facing the statue of Apollo. And of course, what does Apollo represent? Youth, beauty, all the Greek ideals. And we're going to learn about this. By the way, I do think Nathan was right there. And just to let you in on a little something, the word Gabbai, what did it mean in the Talmud? It does not mean the person who calls people to the Torah. It means the tax collectors. It's a negative word. Those who would collect taxes and give them to the Romans. Jews turning to other Jews, getting their money, often through harsh, draconian means, because if they didn't give enough to the Romans, they were in for it. So now we get to Shaul Chernichovsky. I love this poem. Okay, I need a dramatic reader. Let's see. Dale is going to read this.
Are we on the first page, or where are we?
Now we are on the page right before that.
Oh.
There are 2 pages of this. So right before that, you see facing the statue of Apollo?
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay. Facing the statue of Apollo by Shaul Chernichovsky. I came to you, God forgotten forever, God of the days of old and forgotten times, ruler over people who are invigorated, breaker of their strength, abounding in youth, God of a mighty generation, giants on earth, conqueror by might over the borders of esteemed nations, restorer of heroes, a crown on his children, laurel leaves on their prideful foreheads, conqueror of their gods, and appeared to them, placed above all the rulers of the world, a generation with God on the earth, intoxicated with the abundance of life. The God of youth, exalted, joyous, beautiful, controller of the sun and of the order of life.
And I don't have a word there.
Okay. In the
something of song.
And in the multifaceted treasuries, in a sea of melodies and in myriad gowns. God of the joy of life, with all its riches and glory, they attacked him and hit him in their variegated pictures.
And I'm going to ask for another reader. By the way, I would get in trouble when I first did this. I think it might have been before rabbinical school, and I should not be capitalizing the word God here. So I would get in a lot of trouble. My teacher at JTS, I remember capitalizing the word gods when talking about idolatrous gods. So that's my apology. I made a mistake there. One more reader. Peter. Yes. You didn't go yet, right? No. Yeah, go ahead.
I just had a quick question. Whenever we write God's name on paper or whatever, we always have a dash where the oath's supposed to be. Is that something that you're talking about?
So, no. And also on top, Bet Samachdal, B'siyata Dishmaya, or Bet Hey Baruch Hashem. I became more liberal about these things at JTS. The reason I did is because if God's name Yud Hey Vav Hey is written out, that is something that requires burial, lest you take that name in vain, but not in the vernacular language. But people have become strict and they want to write GD or G-D, and that's fine with me if people want to write that. But I don't consider this a matter that needs to go in the Geniza unless it had the Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey written out, but it doesn't. Okay, what? Well, we bury it with people. We have a Geniza pile. Go ahead.
I came to you. Do you recognize me? Here I am, the Jew. We are engaged in an everlasting war. From the ocean's waters to the splitting of the sea, the abyss lying in wait between us, filling to its mouth with tumults and chaos. I have come before you. I will bow before your statue, a symbol of the light in life. I will bow. I will prostrate myself to the good and the lofty, to the one who is exalted in completing the entire earth, to the one who is glorified by completing all of the creations, to the one who is lifted up with the great secrets of creation. I will bow to life, to strength, to beauty. I will bow to all the beautiful images that they lay waste to, the corpses of people and the decay of the seed of humanity, rebels against life by the hand of my rock, the Almighty, the wondrous God of the desert, the God who conquered Canaan in the end. They arrested him and tied him up with tefillin straps.
Wow, in the Bible there's no tefillin straps. You get rabbinic literature. But you have here brazen idolatry. You have here this idea of returning. And this is why this became so much proto-Zionist. Because we're going to be like those Jews of the desert. We're going to till the soil. We're going to tame the swamps. We're going to be those people. And so it's interesting. I mean, you have, rather than say, this is someone we don't want to be like, you have Chernichovsky streets all over Israel. So, because you have the Zionist influence there, very anti-rabbinic, but wanting to return to the Jew of the desert conquering the land of Canaan. Thoughts?
There's explicit idolatry here. There's also seems to be this message that we were like this statue of Apollo. We were young and powerful and strong, the god of the desert who conquered Cain in the end, and then we turned into something weaker, tied in by the tefillin straps of the rabbis. I mean, that's one thing. I'm not 100% sure on that interpretation, though, but it seems to make some sense. The other one I could possibly see is the idea that Apollo represents the Enlightenment. The Greek philosophy influenced ideas of the Enlightenment, and then he's sort of calling on Jews to embrace that and turn away from an older set of ideas that have been tied up with tefillin straps. I'm really curious to hear your explanation of this poem, Rabbi.
So, context. Different time period than Judah Lieb Gordon. You have pogroms that have hit since 1881. You have the May laws. You have major restrictions throughout Russia, and persecution. And there are a couple ways to respond to it. One way to respond is to double down on your faith. Another way to respond is, this is what's got us in trouble. If only we, and I don't think it was an accident they went back to the Greek times. And you're right, Apollo represented the intellect and the Enlightenment. If only we had adopted this way of life. If only we had the strength that came with it, rather than sitting in yeshiva and physically getting weak. And again, it's this idea, we can get the broader society to like us, to appreciate us. We just have to turn to them, and we know, does that work? No, absolutely not, as you said. But there's a longing there. Now, Chernyakhovsky, this is not, this is his most extreme poem. I mean, Sakti Saki al Halamot. I played with the, and laughed with all the dreams. I mean, this is not this is one poem, isolated poem I chose for an extreme example of showing how, and he calls himself the Jew. And the thing that's interesting me is this everlasting war. These people hate us. They're after us. I mean, and he wasn't yet at Kishinev. That was Bialik with City of Slaughter. But look at how peaceful an era he's describing. Youth. In the Bible, not the Nephilim, not the fallen ones, but giants on earth, the Anakim, these great giant figures. A crown, laurel leaves, all these symbols of beauty.
I just got a question.
Go ahead.
When he says, I have come before you, I will bow before your statue. Who is the you?
Apollo.
Well,
It's called the Nochach Peso Apollo, facing the statue of Apollo.
yeah, I mean, that's just,
That time I got God right, but the question is, but some of the times I did not hear, because I don't think he's ever talking about our God, although it's a question. Maybe he is saying they attack.
At the end he is. The wondrous God of the desert who conquered.
The one I should have capitalized. Yeah, I got them all wrong here. It's I mean, when someone's future looks bleak, you need to find a source of light. And one way to do it is be nostalgic. I mean, this is not so different from our biblical characters. Remember that fish we had for free in Egypt and how good it was with the leeks and the onions? I mean, you're looking for a sense of nostalgia when all is appears to be lost, and no more go before the Goyish Asar here. No, I'm not going to him. I'm going all the way back to the Greek period, to Apollo, who represents strength, beauty, and youth, vitality in life. When I don't see any around me, when there are attacks on my friends, and Easter Day, pogroms, and I got no protection. How could this be? This is not our story. This is not our history. Our history is a history of conquering Canaan. That's what we want back. So there's more here, and I didn't translate it all, but what's being attacked is the conservatism of the rabbinate here. I mean,
and that was the reference to the Jewish God.
Yeah.
In the fourth from the last, rebels against life by the hand of my rock, the Almighty. It says Suri Shaddai. That's not Apollo. That's
Suri Shaddai. Yeah.
And you capitalize that appropriately.
Yes. So here's how I'm going to conclude this. We have a lot of ideas of enlightenment that were about originally full integration into society and how wonderful that will be. And when we saw that we were dependent on a king, and Judah Lieb Gordon's king was different than, the father was different than the son, who was Shaul Chernichovsky's time. A lot can change in 30 years, so 36 years. And then it became, you know what? This idea is not so great. It's, and I want to just say, I mean, Hitler was the final straw, but there were plenty more. The Great War, World War I, there were plenty of times where we're like, we're not really making progress here over time. It was good while it lasted, but it lasted a very short period of time. And unfortunately, well, fortunately or unfortunately for us, I'm indebted to the Haskalah. I love this stuff because it's still showing that, I mean, these poems were not written in Russian. They were written in Hebrew, and they were written with still this desire, even Chernichovsky, this desire to return to Israel, this desire to connect with our Holy Land and who we were as a people before, albeit in extreme and idolatrous language. And so there were two different approaches, which we know. One approach was there were those who secularized, and then when they saw that it wasn't working, they either became Christian or they left the country. They left for the United States or for Palestine. And then there were those who were more traditional, who tended to stay longer in the places in which they were. There were from people who came in the 1880s, but boy, were they shocked seeing people throw tefillin overboard and all sorts of stuff. And many of those who were the really religious stayed and were the victims of the Holocaust. And I'm not saying just them. I mean, plenty of secular Jews were victims too. But we see that this integration, and it's a question for today. That's what I want to leave us with. To what degree do we as more Western Jews on the whole, and I don't want to speak for anyone, or people of Western society, to what degree do we like this integration today? On one hand, I'm very grateful for having a Western education and for learning secular subjects. On the other hand, the place where I learned these things, the University of Wisconsin, like many universities, seems to be getting more and more extreme. Are we losing the ability to connect there? And the people who take off their stars and are quiet, are they going to lose their sense of identity and pride? Maybe not. Maybe it's an act of safety. But it raises questions to me, because as much as I'm not one of these traditionalists who believes in living in a shtetl and not being exposed, like people in Williamsburg would say, I've never been to Manhattan, even though it's right across the bridge. There is a point there, that there's danger. That being said, there's also danger in being ossified and only sticking to one point of view and not getting exposed to others. Lee.
It occurred to me also that, so what are the options now? So the options are traditional orthodoxy or nothing. So a lot of Jews chose a middle ground, or they chose a way to try to still maintain, like the Marranos, like we've been doing this for thousands of years. They still wanted to maintain some sense of Judaism. They wanted to maybe have Pesach. Maybe they wanted to have Hanukkah, I don't know, but they also wanted to have other kinds of things in their lives, and there was a whole movement of Enlightenment, the Enlightenment.
Mm-hmm. When the toothpaste is out of the tube, you can't put it back in, yet at the same time, a lot of that zeal we now see with the rise of anti-Semitism, and it was always there, but we see it sprouting out. I don't have to tell anyone here that. We see that that we're progressively going to a better place. Not so much. Nathan. And then I'll see if anyone has a last comment before we wrap up.
I'm glad you bring this up, because this is, of course, the question that kind of haunts us when we look at our ancestors struggling with these questions of, do we form separate Jewish communities? Do we integrate? This offer that we're being made, what do we do with that? And something that I've been thinking about a lot these days is a little later than the time period you're talking about, the Bund. Mm-hmm. The big movement, there was a big movement of the Jews in Eastern Europe that called for socialism, essentially. It was a left-wing movement that called for Jews to join arms with the non-Jewish workers and farmers and the common people, and that they would struggle together, that they would abandon nations and nationalism, and it was very internationalist, and let's all work together, and we'll work together to oppose the Tsar and oppose oppression and oppose discrimination on any grounds, and we'll build this wonderful new world together. And the Zionists, they want to divide Jews from that, and then when we get to those pogroms in the I think it was Kishinev. I think it was 1903. Yeah. You start having these major pogroms, and the left-wing forces in Eastern Europe, either those farmers and workers join in the pogroms, or they stand aside and don't do anything to protect Jews from this massive wave of violence by the state. And it disillusions a lot of these Jews in the Bund who go and join Zionism or leave for other places. And of course, in the end, we know what happens. The Jews in the shtetls who refuse to accept modernity, who refuse to modernize, they get wiped out by Hitler. And the Jews in the Bund, the ones who stood with their comrades, they get wiped out by Hitler also, most of them. Or they get sent to Siberia by Stalin. And neither of those approaches really works. It's the Jews in America, it's the Zionists who went to Israel, who survive. And now we find ourselves sort of with this question. The ones who go over to America. But I don't know, I feel a bit I don't, one doesn't want to get too political, and one doesn't want to get too much into one's personal things, but I feel a bit like one of those Jews in the Bund. While I've never been secular or a communist or anything like that, I felt for a very long time like there was a lot of people here who were allied with me in that sort of struggle, and now those people are either standing aside and saying, well, yes, anti-Semitism is bad, and then doing nothing, or are taking part in it. And it is one struggles with exactly what to do here. My wife and I, we have a wonderful house, we have a wonderful child, we have a wonderful community, and we think, should we look into selling our wonderful house and leaving our wonderful community behind and going to Israel? Will we be safer if we do that? Should we stay here and try and make the best of it? What do we do? And I don't have an answer, we don't have an answer, and I don't know that anyone does right now. Anyway, you wanted to say something, Rabbi?
I just wanted to say October 7th was the last wake-up call to that, and the October 8th Jews, people who we thought were allies, and I mean, I made friends and I connected with people at a mosque, and I wasn't just there, in the Christian community as well, and didn't hear from them, and you feel abandoned. And for me, it's less so because I was only here a year before, but people who had formed decade-long alliances that evaporated overnight. So these questions still remain with us. To what degree is this assimilation? I know you could say assimilation versus acculturation, but to what degree? On one hand, I don't see people moving from here to closed communities. On the other hand, I see a lot of people who feel isolated, who feel homeless in different senses, whether politically, whether in terms of friends and allies. So I'm going to end there. It's not the happiest note, but I want to thank KOH for the series. And if you want to learn about conservative Judaism this week at 7 in the Youth Lounge. And I want to thank Evan and Talia and Dwight and Joanne and Will. Thank you. Thank you.
Do you need to RSVP for Thursday?
Let me know. Just so you don't need to RSVP.
I'll email.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so